let's get going. So we're going to watch a video. It's very important context for the entire rest of this stream that you pay attention here, okay? So if you're not paying attention, pay attention now. You know, if you're just sitting in your bed with your boyfriend, kissing and stuff while I play in the background, you fucking stop right now and you get the stream and you glue your eyes to this video. You can kiss later, okay? You can kiss anytime, it's not important. Here we go.
When I was 17, I quoted Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me in my college application essay. The line that spoke to me stated simply, I am not tragically colored. There is no sorrow dammed up in my soul nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. At 17, I had no idea what life would bring, but Zora's sentiment articulated so beautifully how I felt as a daughter of immigrants then and now. Nothing about me was or is tragic. I am perfectly made. I can wax eloquent on complex legal issues in English while also belting Guayaquil de mis amores in Spanish. I can change a diaper with one hand and console a crying toddler with the other. I am a woman of color. I am a mom. I am a cisgender millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional, but my existence is not a box-checking exercise. I am a walking declaration, a woman whose inflection does not rise at the end of her sentences, suggesting that a question has been asked. I did not sneak into CIA. My employment was not and is not the result of a fluke or slip through the cracks. I earned my way in, and I earned my way up the ranks of this organization. I am educated, qualified, and competent, and sometimes I struggle. I struggle feeling like I could do more, be more to my two sons, and I struggle leaving the office when I feel there's so much more to do. I used to struggle with imposter syndrome, but at 36, I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. I am tired of feeling like I'm supposed to apologize for the space I occupy rather than intoxicate people with my effort, my brilliance. I am proud of me, full stop. My parents left everything they knew and loved to expose me to opportunities they never had. Because of them, I stand here today a proud first-generation Latina and officer at CIA. I am unapologetically me. I want you to be unapologetically you, whoever you are. Know your worth. Command your space.
Okay. Are you okay, guys? Your life before that was infinitely better than your life now. And I'm proud to be the one to ruin it. I'm proud to have that privilege. First, I just wanted to talk about the video as, just on the surface level, right? So we have a mestizo Latin American woman. She's apparently the daughter of Ecuadorian immigrants. I don't know how I know that. I just saw someone say it. I mean, I don't really care where she's from. It doesn't really matter. They didn't mention it, apparently. It's not important. So she's speaking as if she's rattling off spoken word poetry, right? This is no coincidence. This comes from Amanda Gorman, who did the read spoken word poetry in this exact same cadence, just empty sort of sounding liberal word salads.
Not because we will never again know defeat.
It's clearly inspired by that video, okay? So this lady, whose name is Mija, which we know because she has it on her fucking shirt. Mija, why is it on her shirt? Why does she have her name on her shirt? Mija. Female gender symbol with a fist in the middle. You are worth it. She speaks like she's rattling out. She's reading poetry. She lists her identity categories, which for some reason includes cisgender. Not sure why that's in there. She also describes herself as intersectional, which makes no sense for an individual to describe himself as intersectional, like its identity category. This is it's like a video that's made by a Markov chain of Tumblr posts from 2016, basically. It doesn't really make much sense, right? And then immediately after that, she says that her existence is not a box-checking exercise, despite the fact that she just made a point of listing off all of the boxes which she checks. And, those boxes seem to be the entire point of the video. Then, midway through, you finally get to, the plot twist. This is a CIA video. She's talking about her achievement in the workplace as a CIA officer, whatever that means. I'm not sure what kind of officer she is, but working in the CIA, they don't do anything good. She's like, this job wasn't given to me to anyone. I earned it. I triumphed over adversity. I triumphed over being a cisgender millennial with generalized anxiety disorder. And she did it all while being unapologetically her. She's not letting the oppression of people of color or of women or of people with anxiety get in the way of achieving her dream of working at the CIA. And at the end of the video, she's like, "You are worth it too. You too can do what I'm doing." Now, let's analyze it beyond the surface level. Why might the CIA want to make a video like this? Well, it's pretty easy, right? If you look at like the 2020 US election, presidential election demographics. So who are the people who the CIA might want to recruit? The CIA wants mostly college-educated people, pretty much only college-educated people, okay? What is the age demographic that most people graduating with a bachelor's and maybe even a master's are going to be in? 18 to 29. Those people overwhelmingly vote Democrat, okay? They're receptive to this sort of language. They're receptive to this sort of idea of like inclusive workplace, etc. Okay, it's nothing special. You could take this same video and change CIA to anything, right? To Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Walmart, whatever. And it would apply perfectly. Our workplace is inclusive. It's a good place for you to come as an individual and advance your career. Okay, simple, right? So looking at this and saying, "Oh, the CIA is adopting woke ideology. The CIA has appropriated this language for themselves. It's time to abandon it, etc." It's just kind of stupid because all that they're doing is looking out for their interests as an institution, which is they need to recruit people. They need to recruit young people. They need to recruit young, educated people. They're also quite advantaged from recruiting people who are of immigrant backgrounds or black or whatever, because for one, it's good for PR to be able to say that they have an inclusive workplace. But two, it's very practically useful as well. Someone who speaks, someone with an immigrant background who speaks like a second language, especially with like an accent where they can possibly blend in or at least be like liaison officers with people in other countries, etc. It's very advantageous for the CIA, who do lots of espionage in foreign countries, right? It's incredibly logical, just looking at it from purely material standpoint. They're not doing this because they're going woke. They're not doing this because they care about any of the values being espoused here. They're not using this language honestly. They're just doing it because it's advantageous for them. They're just doing it because it's good for them to get recruits to help them do the shit that they do. And if you don't know the kind of shit that they do, well, let me just give you a quick example of Guatemala. Guatemala is just one example, okay? Guatemala, the CIA outright orchestrated the overthrow of an elected socialist president in 1954, Jacobo Arbenz. This led to a long series of military dictatorships and military rule, which then led to a genocide in the 80s of at least 200,000 people. All the while, the CIA was continuing to support these military dictatorships in Guatemala, often after the US Senate had tried to stop them from doing so. They continued to do it clandestinely, and up until 1995, they were still supporting death squads in Guatemala, at least from what we know. This is all from US government documents, okay? This is not a conspiracy, it's true. We're talking here about people who, just as Latino as Mija here, and they haven't exactly been positively influenced by the CIA. Now, on an individual level, I'm 100% sure that Mija loves her job at the CIA, right? She probably makes good money. She probably has, I'm sure her job in the office is totally disconnected from having to deal with any of the atrocities that the CIA has committed and will commit and are committing, etc., right? And that's what the video is all about. It's all about individualism. It's all about individual achievements. It's all about individual workplace stuff, right? Like in this workplace, you as an individual can advance, you as an individual can have a good career, etc. So this is also very sort of linked to neoliberalism, okay? Like, as I went over in my video about neoliberalism, how neoliberal ideology tries to individualize like tries to turn people essentially into atomized individuals who are competing in the market, in this case in the job market. You know, it's not talking about, it's not using this language in the terms of group liberation, in the terms of systemic change. It's using them in the terms of individual success, which is fundamentally totally compatible with the dominant ideology, already compatible with everything to do with the CIA, right? Like the CIA has, for its entire existence, relied on sort of individuals who are unrepresentative of majority views in their countries, of popular sentiment in their countries, to work for them, okay? Like in Cuba, for example, with the Bay of Pigs, terrorist attacks in Cuba, which were sponsored by the CIA, etc. This is nothing new. The CIA has always made ample use of people from other countries who in the USA would be considered ethnic minorities, maybe even sexual minorities, etc., to essentially, you know, do their bidding, or, you know, work with the CIA to implement their sort of will on these countries. It's nothing new. They're just kind of doing it in a way that's using the language of the time now. So yeah, there are however times where corporations, institutions, etc. do kind of try to frame their use of this language in terms of like, so I'll call it like sort of liberatory language, like emancipatory language to do with race and sexual issues, gender issues, etc. But they never do it as like they never really do it in a way that includes any sort of systemic analysis, right? Like, you know, the Coca-Cola Corporation might tweet a BLM hashtag, or Cheetos might say on Twitter trans rights, right? It's just, you know, performatively acknowledging sentiment that is popular among a certain consumer demographic that they have calculated is more likely to buy their products. It's not them actually expressing support for any sort of real political change. It's just corporations being corporations. It's nothing new. You know, during the McCarthy era, corporations would express patriotic sentiment, pro-capitalist sentiment, etc. Obviously, because it was popular among the population, thanks to propaganda, etc. Right? But, you know, if you look at this materially in any sort of, you know, materially, really just any sort of material analysis, it's totally obvious why they're doing it. It's, you know, the CIA also gets an extra benefit from that sort of thing in that it, you know, it's basically causes the sort of infighting that they love to cause, where people are like, oh, the CIA did use this language, now we can never use it again, guys. I guess we need to be racist now. And there's other people who, like, you know, are against that, and they fight on Twitter all day, etc. That's also very good for the CIA. So it's just all around very beneficial. So what I wanted to kind of seek into here is talking about that very thing. People who kind of talk about this as like evidence of identity politics now being useless, right? And I think, like, yeah, obviously this rhetoric from these institutions is empty. They don't care about fixing systemic issues that are faced by these groups. They don't. They want to exacerbate them, if anything, right? Like, a lot of the reason why Latinos like Mija are even in the US in the first place, for a lot of them, is because their countries have been ruined by things that the CIA at least contributed to, if not outright orchestrated. Okay? So, very funny, just as taking the video as it is. It's a very juvenile thing to do, to kind of define your politics and define what you consider to be acceptable discourse by what your opponents are saying and the views that they are espousing, okay? It's very stupid. It's gray zone sort of stuff, right? So the problem here with this video, the problem here with, like, sort of, well, I have to say first, like, I also understand there's lots of people out there who are extremely fucking annoying, right? Hold on, I should probably be big for this. There's lots of people out there who are extremely fucking annoying, right? Extremely fucking annoying, and who love using this sort of language, who just seem to be concerned about nothing but sort of policing others in these sorts of terms, who basically just really get off on being like a 2016 Tumblr feed personified. So I understand, right? These people are fucking annoying, but you can't base your politics or change your opinions on on stuff like this, just because some people are annoying, just because some people annoy you, just because institutions or corporations that you are against appropriated, etc. Otherwise, it's gonna be so fucking easy to neuter you, because they can just, you know, observe that and do it forever and force you to just completely to just change your beliefs all the fucking time. What this is simply the CIA, corporations, you know, online annoying idiots, woke liberals, etc., taking language which can be useful and misusing it and appropriating it, right? It's bad actors misusing something for bad reasons, okay? It's like in the last thing I clipped from my stream, which was talking about Zanderhol's take on the US not pulling out of Afghanistan, okay? So he thought that like the US leaving Afghanistan would compromise women's rights, okay? But the problem with that take isn't that women's rights are bad. It's not that we don't want women's rights, okay? Essentially, by looking at this thing and saying, oh, we need to stop using this sort of language, we need to stop caring about race now, we need to stop caring about mental illness now, we need to stop caring about sexual minorities now, is doing the same thing. I am probably what a lot of people would call a class reductionist in some ways, right? But not because I don't think these issues are important. You know, like we can see these concepts as useful, socially constructed as they are, without just saying that they should be abandoned, right? Like it's one thing to focus on class, it's another thing to completely ignore how class interacts with race and changes the way that certain people experience capitalism based on these factors, right? Like it's all well and good. You can look at like the reason why black people are oppressed in the US isn't just because of the color of their skin, right? They didn't simply appear in the US one day alongside white people, and white people just said, okay, we need to oppress these black people because of the color of their skin. You know, it was for economic reasons. It was because hundreds of years ago, some Europeans needed slaves and they needed justification for why these people should be slaves. And it was racism, right? Simple. You know, you can look at that as the root of these problems, as the root of why black people in the USA, across the Americas, experience the ill effects of capitalism differently to white people, more severely than white people on a group level. It's all interrelated. It's not something that you can just so simply throw aside and say, okay, let's ignore race completely. Let's do a Morgan Freeman and say, just pretend that race doesn't exist. No, because these things, you know, I don't want to use the word because people hate it for some reason, but these things intersect, okay? Class and race intersect. There are more working class black people as a proportion than there are working class white people. There are more white bourgeoisie than there are black bourgeoisie. And this is because, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, these socially constructed ideas of race greatly affect how people experience capitalism, how different groups of people experience capitalism. And these are things that you're not going to just get rid of by implementing worker ownership of the means of production, by abolishing commodity production, all of these things. It's not just going to go away. Sure, it will help, but it's not just going to simply go away. I want to illustrate this point of appropriation too by saying that the rhetoric of class struggle can very easily be appropriated as well. Very easily. In fact, the rhetoric of class struggle was the original appropriation, far more severe than this appropriation. So if you're using the fact that the CIA is using emancipatory rhetoric in a dishonest way, right, you know, then you're going to have to deal with that as well. This is something that so-called class reductionists do not like to talk about. The fact that fascists appropriated Marxist rhetoric or Marxist sounding grunts long before any of this sort of woke capitalism sort of thing was ever even on the horizon. Okay, I'd like to give you guys a quote from Lenin, which I think is very relevant to this. Lenin once said, "The USSR was a proletarian nation, and that the USSR was fighting to impose a higher social justice, and that other nations at the time were fighting to maintain the privileges of class and caste." That wasn't Lenin, that was Mussolini. in 1945, months before he was killed. Another quote from Mussolini in The Doctrine of Fascism, written in 1932. If the bourgeoisie believe they have found in us their lightning conductors, they are mistaken. We must go towards the people. Okay? That sounds pretty, he's using the rhetoric of class struggle there, right? We are not merely tools of the bourgeoisie. We are rather tools of the people. We should appeal to the people instead, essentially the proletariat, the working classes. But he continues, okay? We wish the working classes to accustom themselves to the responsibilities of management so that they may realize that it is not an easy matter to run a business. So, right, he takes the rhetoric of class struggle and twists it essentially to justify the bourgeoisie, to justify the bourgeoisie's position in society. We need to educate the proletariat so they understand that the bourgeoisie actually, are actually talented people, and that what they do with their businesses is good for society and actually pretty hard, and thus they should be happy with their lot. You see, it's really not difficult to kind of take like left-sounding rhetoric, whether it's emancipatory, anti-racist, post-colonial, sexual liberation sort of rhetoric, or class rhetoric like this, and twist it, okay? The difference between us and Benito Mussolini, the difference between us and the CIA is that, we don't propose that the working class accustom themselves to the responsibilities of management so that they may realize that it's not an easy matter to run a business. We don't frame problems with racism and discrimination against LGBT people, discrimination against people with mental illness, etc., as if these are simply individual disadvantages that individuals can overcome if they just are their real selves, right? We say that, we are not the lightning conductors of the bourgeoisie. They are mistaken if they think of us in that way. We must go towards the people, and we mean that we must go towards the people. We don't say that we must go towards the people and teach them that it's not easy to run a business. We don't list off a list of someone's identity categories and then say, despite your identity categories, you're great, you can do it, while proposing none of the systemic change that is needed in order to fix the disadvantages that leads to them being in this position where them supposedly overcoming something in the workplace is an achievement in the first place, where there is this adversity in the first place that they are supposedly overcoming to get to where they are. And also the CIA doesn't fucking exist, okay? This sort of backlash against so-called wokeness, etc., it's essentially just people allowing themselves to be defined by the perceived, the sort of aesthetic positions of people who they don't like, okay? And that's a fucking awful way to do politics, right? It's an absolutely abominable way to do politics. It leads you into the sort of Nas bullshit that people like Glenn Greenwald are getting into now. The difference between the left and these people is class analysis. Class analysis is not incompatible with the rhetoric of post-colonial emancipation. It's not incompatible with acknowledging that racism exists and that is a problem that we can tackle while also that is interlinked with class issues that we can also tackle while also tackling class issues, and acknowledging that these problems aren't just going to magically go away as you tackle those class issues too, right? You can acknowledge that problems experienced, for example, by Black people in the USA are irrevocably linked to class, while also acknowledging that they experience these class-related problems in generally a more severe way than white people do. There are individual white working class people who are just as poor, just as downtrodden as individual Black people are, right? But the reason that these people are just as poor and just as downtrodden can be different because they are treated differently under capitalism, under at least the capitalism that exists in the USA currently, as a group. So that was kind of the rant that I just wanted to go over on this stream. Like, I think the term class reductionist is kind of overused because it's kind of just used against anyone who's like some fucking dumbass basically says, oh, the liberals pretend to be anti-racist without actually wanting to fix the systemic issues that essentially keep people who experience racism down. We need to be racist now. I don't think these people have anything really resembling real class analysis most of the time. They're not so much class reductionists as they are just people who dislike certain groups and dedicate themselves to disliking said groups. Like, it's not class reductionist to say that issues of race generally boil down to issues of class, but you can't get around that, you know, problems that people experience due to their class are exacerbated by these socially constructed identity categories that are very prevalent today and that are not going to just go away. Democrats love to paint themselves as woke, etc. But, you know, there's things like, you know, the way that you would fix black disadvantage are doing a lot of the things that they refuse to do, like implementing a universal single-payer healthcare system, for example, ensuring that everyone has equal access to healthcare, no matter who they are, no matter how rich they are. You know, liberals are like, oh, racism sure is bad. They individualize these problems. Okay, they like to frame like they might acknowledge like systemic racism, kind of in passing, but they don't offer systemic solutions. Their solutions are more like, you know, we need to make the police nicer. We need to give the police diversity training and stuff like that. More so than like, we need to fundamentally reform the police or abolish them as an institution, or fundamentally reform the way that we deal with our response to certain crimes, etc., or certain perceived crimes. So a so-called like woke Marxist can look at the issue of the US police murdering black people all the time and say, you know, the issue here is fundamentally in what the police are for, you know, and the reason why black people are targeted in such a way by cops, or the reason why they're looked down upon like this by cops, is linked back all the way to, you know, the initial sort of original sin of Europeans deciding that they wanted more slaves and essentially inventing racism. That's another thing that I want people to take from what I'm saying here about that CIA video. It's totally individualized, right? It's all about this one woman, about her achievements, and about how other individuals like her can also succeed. That's the perfect neoliberal framing of anything, really. Neoliberalism is all about individuals competing in the market, competing as human capital in the market. And, you know, there's no incompatibility between that and someone acknowledging that they are Latino and they have generalized anxiety disorder and that they are an immigrant. Neoliberalism doesn't give a shit about those things. I mean, neoliberalism itself doesn't give a shit about those things. Some neoliberals might. That's why, you know, you have sort of woke neoliberalism, and you can also have conservative neoliberalism. It's very adaptable.